Alright, so this lesson is going to be on learner-centered teaching, or the comparison of learner-centered versus teacher-centered teaching. Our objectives are to explore the characteristics of learner-centered teaching, compare learner-centered teaching to teacher-centered teaching, and identify examples of both learner and teacher-centered teaching. Alright, so learner-centered teaching. Learner-centered teaching focuses attention on what the student is learning, how the student is learning, the conditions under which the student is learning, whether the student is retaining and applying the learning, and how current learning positions the student, how how current learning positions the student for future learning. That was kind of hard to say. Um, so really, learner-centered teaching is exactly as it sounds. The teaching is very student focused and is developed in such a way that it engages and involves the student itself, um, and so they are the center of the designed learning. Whereas teacher-centered then would be something that's more teacher-focused and is less involved for the students themselves. Alright, so the path to good teaching can be much easier to navigate when we view students as our traveling companions. When we take them along with us on this journey for learning, then we have a much easier path to good teaching. The more we know about them and how they learn, the more likely we are to experience the joy of teaching. It's a lot more fun to teach students when you understand how they learn and how they can be involved and who they are as individuals. Teaching can be a lot of fun when both you and the student understand each other. So, what constitutes good teaching? Sensitivity to individual learners' characteristics, concern with class level and progress, preparation and organization of the course, knowledge of the subject, enthusiasm for the subject of teaching, clarity and understanding, availability and helpfulness, impartiality of evaluation. All those constitute good teaching. Um, and again, if you kind of pay attention to these things that focus on the student themselves and what might be happening with them, is really where that good teaching is going to take place. So there's interpersonal considerations then. So teaching requires effective communication that involves two people, the teacher and the student, exchanging ideas, so talking with each other, asking students what they think about things, and then building knowledge and influencing attitudes. All that back and forth interaction of two people, and that communication between both the teacher and the student is really beneficial in the education and learning process. Right, so teaching inclusively. You want to look for a pattern in the attention you give to certain students. It's real easy sometimes to only give attention to the two or three students who are raising their hand and answering questions. But you want to make sure that you're providing attention to everybody in the classroom. So all of your students need to know that you are concerned with them and their learning, and they'll be more engaged and more likely to succeed in learning in your classroom. You may be seeing signals to other students that they're invisible in your classroom. If you're not calling on them or making eye contact or making conversation with them, they may not feel like you even know that they exist, and that's never a good situation for a student that's trying to learn. So eye contact is crucial in teaching. Um, so try to make eye contact, even if you're not directly addressing students. Try to make some eye contact with students that you don't maybe particularly answer questions or things like that to keep them engaged and know that you know that they're there and want them to have a good learning experience. Give encouragement to students who don't find it easy to volunteer. Be encouraging and help support their willingness to be involved in the lesson through that encouragement. And then be aware of different learning styles, but avoid grouping or labeling students by types. So you need to know like who learns in what different ways and how those different styles may interact with each other in a lesson. So be aware of those types of things, and then be sure examples and illustrations don't exclude some members of the class. And explain the course material clearly, and then summarize materials that help students remember. You always want to go back and do a summary of any lesson towards the end, or at least of main points that they should have gotten to help kind of tie things back together. All right, so teaching techniques for learning styles. Use computer-assisted instruction when possible for sensory learners. Okay, the computer-assisted instruction is just one good way for people to be involved in a different way than you just talking to them. You want to provide intervals, however brief, for students to think about what they have been told. I actually did my research for my dissertation on the use of wait time. We used psychophysiological measures, so actual physiological responses to cognitive processes to determine appropriate amount of wait time, and 3 to 5 seconds is how long you need to wait. At least 3 seconds is how long you need to wait when asking a question. So you'll ask a question, wait 3 seconds, and give those students that, because it'll take them 3 seconds to process what you said and develop a response on average. So give them that 3 seconds to think about what it is that you were talking about. Then give students opportunities to do something active besides transcribing notes, such as small group brainstorming activities. Transcribing notes is not a good way to learn. It's a good way to miss information, really. If you were to just go through here and copy down what's on the PowerPoint slides or print out these PowerPoint slides and say, okay, that's good, you're going to have some information, but you're going to miss out on some things. And so just transcribing notes is usually not a good way to learn, but being engaged in some small group activities or other hands-on type activities is a great way to help boost that overall learning. All right, so some students may need assistance. Behaviors that indicate a student is in trouble. Poor grades or a change from good to poor grades. Obviously, if students aren't having good grades in your class, then they need some sort of assistance to help them, be successful in class. Students with excessive absences or depressed mood, exaggerated emotional response, dramatic loss of weight, highly disruptive behavior, or overtly suicidal thoughts, homicidal threats. If you come across a student, you need to pay attention. Like, you never know what students are going through at home or outside of the classroom. So you kind of need to pay attention for things like these in all of your students, just to try to help them out in whatever situation is possible. And that's not even just coming from we want them to be successful in our class thing, but we want them to be happy and healthy and productive members of society. And so just taking note of things like these will be really, will show the students that you care. When you notice these types of things, they'll know that you care, and it can make a huge difference in their lives and what they go on to do after they leave your class. So kind of, pay attention to those different types of behaviors and try to assist them as best you can when you notice that they may be presenting some of these different behaviors. All right, so to help students get assistance, talk to the student when you both have sufficient time and in a private place. You don't want to call them out on some of the stuff in front of everybody. You might just say, hey Johnny, come here. Can you take a minute and chat with me privately over here, and just pull them aside and talk to them. Be matter of fact and control your emotions. So get straight to the point, but don't let your emotions dictate how you respond or talk to that student. Sometimes when students are acting out and are being a little wild or crazy or whatnot, if you don't control your emotions, you might end up responding in the wrong way and yelling at them and making situations worse. And heightened emotions never turn out good in the moment, for sure. But give the student your undivided attention. Make sure that they know that you're paying attention to what it is they have to say and that you really are concerned. So express your concern in clear, direct, non-judgmental terms. Listen in a respectful, non-threatening way. So don't try to threaten them in any type of way, even if it's just like, I'm gonna call your parents or send you to the office. Don't threaten them. You may still have to do those sorts of things, call their parents and whatnot, but don't don't make it come off as a threat when you do that. The convey support and understanding when you're talking to them. Suggest the student call the counseling service for an appointment. You send them to a counselor and talk um, about things that may be helpful for them. All right, so let's just kind of look at teacher-centered versus learner-centered. I told you that learner-centered is focused on both students and instructors, primarily focused on the experience that students are having, whereas teacher-centered is focused on the instructor. And so to really kind of break these apart, think of teacher-centered as, the most teacher-centered type of lesson that you could teach would be a straight lecture. If I got up here and I just, and really it's not so uncommon from what this type of lesson is, and it's just presenting the information and talking. You get a little bit closer to learner-centered when you take that lecture and turn it into a discussion where the teacher asks some questions for you to answer. But it gets more learner-centered. The most learner-centered you can be is when the students have complete control over what is going to happen in the classroom. They're basically designing their own learning. They're getting their hands in there and being hands-on and whatnot. So that's very learner-centered. That's a good way to just kind of break apart the two on the two extreme ends. So again, teacher-centered, focus on instructor. Instructor talks, students listen. Students work alone. Instructor chooses topics. Instructor evaluates student learning, and classroom is quiet. Learner-centered focuses both on students and instructor. Instructor models. Students interact with instructor and one another. They work in pairs and groups or alone depending on the purpose of the activity. Students have some choices of topics. Students evaluate their own learning. Instructors also evaluates, but the classroom is often noisy and busy. So that's kind of the overall of teacher-centered, learner-centered. Definitely important to understand the difference in what teacher-centered means versus learner-centered or student-centered. So long as you have that foundational grasp of the difference between those two types of things, you should be fine.